You lived an entire life before the age of 3. You were born. You opened your eyes for the first time. You heard voices before you understood words. You learned what comfort felt like, what fear felt like. You stared at ceilings, laughed at faces, cried in the dark, learned how to crawl, how to stand, how to walk. At some point, you said your first word, and you remember almost none of it. Not your first birthday. Not the first time your mother left the room and you panicked. Not the first time you recognized your own name. Almost your entire beginning is gone. Most people think the answer is simple. Your brain just wasn't developed enough yet. You were too young, but that's not actually true. Because your baby brain wasn't bad at making memories. In fact, it was doing something much stranger. It was recording everything and then destroying it. In 1905, Sigmund Freud gave this phenomenon a name: infantile amnesia, the strange fact that almost nobody can remember the first few years of their life. For a long time, scientists assumed babies simply couldn't form memories. But that idea collapsed once researchers started testing infants directly. In the 1980s, psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier ran a famous experiment. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above a crib. When the baby kicked, the mobile moved. The babies learned the connection almost immediately. Kick equals movement. Movement equals interesting. And when the same babies returned days later, many of them instantly started kicking again the moment they saw the mobile. They remembered. 2-month-old infants could remember for days. 6-month-olds could remember for weeks, which means babies absolutely can form memories. Their brains can learn, store information, and recall experiences. So if the memories existed, what happened to them? The answer begins deep inside your brain, in a structure called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is what turns experiences into memories. Right now, it's helping you build the story of your life. A conversation, a birthday, a rainy afternoon. But in infants, this system is unfinished. Important pathways involved in long-term memory storage are still under construction. So a baby brain can create short-term memories, but preserving them permanently is much harder. For years, scientists thought that explained everything. But then researchers discovered something far stranger. In 2014, neuroscientists Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn proposed a shocking idea. What if babies forget because their brains are too active? During early childhood, your brain produces new neurons at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis. Your brain is wiring itself from scratch, building the architecture that will become your adult mind. But every time new neurons integrate into existing networks, older connections become disrupted. In other words, the brain isn't just building itself, it's constantly rebuilding itself. And rebuilding destroys things. Franklin and Jocelyn tested this idea in mice. When they increased neurogenesis in adult mice, the mice started forgetting previously learned information. And when they slowed neurogenesis in infant mice, those infant mice held on to memories longer than normal. The conclusion was deeply unsettling. Your baby brain wasn't failing to save memories, it was overwriting them. The same process building your intelligence was also tearing apart the circuits holding your earliest experiences. Imagine trying to preserve a drawing while the wall it's painted on is being demolished and rebuilt every single day. That's basically what infancy is. Your earliest memories weren't erased because they didn't matter. They were erased because your brain prioritized becoming functional over becoming permanent. But memory requires more than storage. It also requires a self. Developmental psychologists discovered that autobiographical memory depends on self-recognition. understanding that you exist as an individual moving through time. Before around 18 months of age, babies don't fully grasp this concept. Researchers demonstrated this using the famous mirror test. A mark is placed on a baby's face, and the baby is shown a mirror. Before about 18 months, most infants react as if they're looking at another child. But after around 18 to 24 months, something changes. They touch the mark on their own face. They recognize themselves. And that moment may represent the birth of the personal self. Because once self-awareness appears, memories can finally attach themselves to an identity. Before that, experiences exist without a narrator. No organized you exists to turn events into a story. And then there's language. Psychologist Catherine Nelson argued that language doesn't just describe memories, it structures them. Before you learned words, your experiences existed mostly as raw sensations: light, fear, warmth, voices. But sensations alone are difficult to organize into lasting narratives. Language gives experiences structure. Once children begin talking about the past with adults, remember the park? Remember your birthday? Their memories become far more stable. Stories survive longer than sensations. So when you ask why you can't remember being a baby, the answer isn't one single flaw in the system. It's everything happening at once. Your hippocampus was immature. Your brain was flooding itself with new neurons. The circuits holding memories were constantly being disrupted. You lacked a stable sense of self, and you didn't yet have language powerful enough to organize your experiences into lasting stories. Every human being who has ever lived lost the beginning of their life this way. And maybe the strangest part is that the loss was necessary, because your brain had a choice: remember everything or become everything. It chose the second option. Your earliest self disappeared, so the person you are now could exist. And somewhere beneath your conscious memory, traces of that first person probably still remain. Not as memories you can replay, but as instincts, emotions, fears, attachments, and invisible echoes from a life you lived before you were capable of remembering it.